We do not have a microphone, so we will all do our best to project our voice. The meeting is recorded. You want to make sure we pick up all of your questions or anything like that. So we'll have the recorder on. My name's Melissa Strassner. I'm with the law firm Berlin, Patton, Ebling. You're all here today for the community meeting workshop on the comprehensive plan and rezoning at the Miramar. Our team, we do have a couple of preliminary matters to discuss. So this community meeting workshop is not a formal public hearing. This is an informational session. It's an opportunity for us, as the applicant, to speak to you as the community to get your thoughts on the project and to present this project to you. As I stated, this will be for a comprehensive plan and rezoning. This is not a formal application yet. So all of you that got notice for the community meeting, you will get notice when there's the formal application and any subsequent public hearings, which would include a planning commission hearing and a recommendation from them to the city commission, and then the city commission will make the final decision. So there will be other opportunities for public input other than this community meeting, but we find this very valuable to get everyone's perspective and to present this project to you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Candace Magalia to introduce all of the team for you.
Hi, good evening everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We are very excited to share with you the vision for this team's idea for the renovation and rehabilitation of the Miramar. And we have an hour and a half together. So with so much interest and so much to go over, the most important thing to us is that we get your feedback. This is a public forum and we want your feedback and we want your questions and we want to know what you want to see for the future of the Miramar as well. So in order to best facilitate that, we are hoping that if you have a question throughout the presentation, rather than ask it during the presentation, there are Post-it notes like this on that table over there when you came in, and over at the sign-in sheet over there. And if you raise your hand throughout the presentation that you need one, I will come over and hand one to you as well. But feel free to stand up, walk over there if you have a question during the presentation, and grab a marker. If you need one though, just raise your hand and I'll bring you a marker and a Post-it note. Go over to one of, you can write your question on the Post-it note and then take it off and tape it onto one of the white posters that are on the windows. There's two over there, and one over there, and one over there. And put your question on there, and we're going to try to save 30 minutes at the end of the presentation so that we can go over everyone's question. Just to make sure we get to everyone's question though, if you put your email address on your Post-it note and we don't get to your question, we will respond via email to you very shortly with whatever your question is. So, on to the team. We are very excited to introduce you to this amazing group assembled here today. The developer of the Miramar Acquisition Company is Patrick DePinto. It's right here. The president of Seaward Development is Matthew Lee. Right here. We have an amazing architectural team for you to hear from tonight. Our first one, I have some notes about his background because it's in depth. The first one is Rick Gonzalez, and Rick is one of Florida's leading architects for historical preservation. He is a former board member of the Federal Advisory Council for Historic Preservation appointed by the President of the United States. He's a former president and current trustee emeritus for the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation. He is a commissioner and architect for the Florida Historical Commission and National Registry, and a fellow Gator. He's a University of Florida Advisory Board for Historic Preservation. So that's Rick, and he's worked on several really amazing projects throughout the state, and he's going to share those with you tonight. We also have Igor Reyes, and Igor is another very well-renowned architect in the state of Florida. His firm worked on the Lowe's Hotel First Convention Center on the beach. They restored the San Moritz. They restored the Seville on South Beach, and he's the lead designer on incorporating the Sarasota School of Design inspired Epic condo building in downtown Sarasota. His firm specializes in adaptive reuse of historical structures. We also have Philip Maria. He's a land planner with Kimley Horn, and he has expertise in smart planning, smart growth, and infrastructure. And then, of course, you already met Melissa. And then we have Brenda Patton here, as well as part of our legal team, and she's at the table in front as well. My name is Candace McElia. I am the Community Relations Director, and it's my goal to make sure that everyone's questions are answered and that we get your feedback on everything that you want to understand and learn about the project. I've lived here off and on since 1984, and I've got 2 teenagers who tell me all the time that I don't know anything because I was born in the 1900s. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this project, though, is because I think it's really cool to be able to link the past with the present and with the future, and to impart on our children and our grandchildren and the future generation of how important it is to preserve the past, but also move forward with the future. And I think that's really what you're going to see tonight with the vision of this project. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to Patrick DePinto, who has a few words.
So I'm going to try to keep this brief because Mr. Leek fed me lunch. I'm not spending more than 2 minutes.
The clock's already started.
I'm not going to leave that. So thank you all for coming. Just wanted to say a bit about the project. Most of you know that our team has worked on the Miramar for close to 3 years. We've been long-term tenants in the building. We've rented from Dr. Hoffman for about 7 years. And initially, we had planned on building a nice, new, shiny building and very epic-like on Palm Avenue. And we went to the city historical department and we were rejected. We spent months and months on the presentation, and we put our best foot forward about why we should raise the building, and we were disappointed, but we were rejected. Looking back, I think that rejection really pushed us to think and say to ourselves and ask us the question: could we do better? We said to ourselves, is it possible to save a nearly 400-foot long wood frame structure that's 100 years old? Initially, we thought not, and that's why we went forward with the demolition plan. Could we afford to do so? In Connecticut, where I built homes and commercial properties before I moved to Sarasota, I was involved in many single-family restoration projects. And anytime we got involved with restoration, compared to a new home, it would always cost us 10 times as much. It was 4 times as long, 10 times the money, and that was my history coming down from Connecticut. So we paused, and we took the time to really reflect and say, once again, can we do better? Matt and I scoured the state, and we ran into Mr. Rick, and immediately we really received an education. We learned that it is possible to save anything if you have an unlimited budget and unlimited time. And we battled on what to save, what not to save, and we said to Rick, there's a building to our north in the GMRK, and that's a historical, and here for this, and they saved a couple of feet. Is that something that you can help us with? And Rick said, you're fired, and said, I have no interest. So we rekindled that relationship, and basically Rick said to us, John, if I'm going to be involved in this project and I'm going to put my pedigree and my name on it, then it has to be done the right way. So I'm driving the bus, we're going to drive the decisions, and so Matt and I listened. And 2 years later, looking back at the demo application that I thought was an amazing presentation, we were rejected. And looking back, I think we made a mistake. We probably moved a little too quick. We made some quick decisions. We typically build new construction, and after the education that we received over the last year and a half, I think that we were rejected. But I think that's at this point, that's a good thing. So we then said to our professionals, how is this possible? So then we spent the last year and a half listening to their guidance based upon their experience and how we could save this landmark. Again, my question was, as a developer, how do we save this structurally compromised building of this land? And then we set off with a plan. Igor and Rick also explained to us, gentlemen, that there is not another Mira. There is not another 400 feet property on South Palm Avenue for all of our benefits. This is a property that really is the fabric of Sarasota. In the last year and a half, Matt and I have spoke to hundreds and hundreds of people. 40 of the tenants in the building are current tenants, business owners downtown, people who live downtown, people who are here 12 months, people that vacation back and forth, and haven't found one person that was happy with our demo application. But in the last year and a half, all these people that we have communicated with said to us, if there's a way to save the Mira, we love that. And so that's why we changed course, we educated ourselves, we paused, we made mistakes. First one, my wife is right, first one. And so we really are trying to do better. That's what I wanted to share with you all about the project. Quickly, I know I lost my bet. 10 seconds on my company. My wife and I are locals. My wife's a native. I've been here 20 years. We are a very small company. We have this many people working in student development. We have a great team. We are local. Our kids go to school local. We're very different than the large companies that swoop into Sarasota and say, how can we make the most of the money? And I will tell you that most of the larger developers that were looking at this property before we acquired it, no one had any interest in this building. They said, too much work, not interested, we're going a different route. We were one of the very few that actually said, is it possible? So we're local, we care. My wife and I have actually, we've developed other properties in town, commercial condominiums. We've lived in our own projects. People have said, how can you live in your own condominium? It's fine. They said, well, if something breaks, I said, we'll fix it. So we're very different. We're local. Our people are local, and we will retain a commercial space in the new building. And if I have my way, we'll reside there. So appreciate your time. And I'll turn it over to the pros.
Sorry, it's my turn again. Yes, okay. So for those of you who just walked in, just a reminder, if you have a question or feedback or anything, there are Post-it notes on the table over there. There's a Post-it notes over there and markers. If you want to write your question down and your email address and take off the Post-it and stick it on the white posters that are on the windows, we'll try to get to everyone's questions and everyone's feedback before we're done here tonight.
One other thing, Ken,
Yeah.
so I just want to say there are a couple of chairs left. So for anyone in the back that feels like maybe they'd like to sit at some point during this hour-long presentation, just raise your hand and we'll get you a chair. There's one up front over here and there's one over here.
So I'm just going to give you a very high-level overview of what's being proposed for the rezone and the renovation of the building before we turn it over to the architectural team who's going to really dive in and deep. So basically, for some proposed benefits for what is being proposed. Well, first of all, what's being proposed is really two 18-story buildings behind what is existing currently, 18-story residential buildings. Renovating the front of the building, renovating the commercial space and the retail space, rehabilitating it, and rezoning that to maximize the light and air for neighboring properties and creating new view corridors. So you're gonna see some pictures of what the original Miramar Plaza looked like back in the 1920s. And originally, as it was built, there was a giant hotel in the back, and then there were 4 buildings in the front, and lots of open spaces, and lots of corridors, and lots of places to sit and to walk. And that's really what the vision is, to bring this property back to look more like that. So the 18-story residential buildings would be less than a single zero lot line of what is zoned right now. What is currently zoned right now would be a 10-story building, and if the developer were to build that, it would be 1 million cubic feet more than what they're asking for at the rezone. So 1 million cubic feet more space is what's currently zoned. The rezone would be doing less cubic space and more view corridors and more open spaces, and really more of a nod back to what the initial property was meant to be. Preservation of the pedestrian experience along Palm Avenue, central access at Palm Avenue and a large central courtyard providing quasi-public open spaces, architecture for the new buildings to be very complementary to the historic office and retail building. And originally, this property was zoned for 18 stories. As recently back in 2005, it was zoned for 18 stories. So it's really just a request to go back to what was originally zoned in 2005. The mixed-use building will really contribute to the livability of downtown Sarasota and maintain the Palm Avenue identity. And there will be a north connecting walkway between Palm Avenue and Miramar Court. Nowadays, the big buzzwords that you hear when it comes to mixed-use development are you want something that's going to be activated and connected and vibrant. And that's really what went into the vision behind this process, is to create something for the community that's going to be valuable. It'll be a nod back to history, but it will also be vibrant and livable for the future. I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
So these are just some of those preliminary matters that we already discussed. So let's go to the next slide. Again, this is the exact request by the applicant. The first is a comprehensive plan amendment, and that is to change the future land use classification from its current future land use of downtown core to downtown Bay. The second is to rezone the property also from downtown core to downtown Bay. That is to allow for 70 residential units. But remember, it's just to develop these 70 residential units. I want to make it clear that this rezoning is not adding any density on this property. The property as it's currently zoned allows for the 70 residential units. The purpose of the rezoning is for the 18 stories, as you'll see as I go through the presentation, and as Igor and Rick will discuss in depth when they go through the project design. So this is the current zoning. You see the Miramar property up here, downtown core, over to the slide, changing that to downtown Bay. As Candace pointed out, prior to 2005, this property was zoned CDBD, or CCBD, Commercial Central Business District. That allowed for the maximum height in the area. We are just going back to what it was pre-2005. This is going to give you a glimpse of the permitted uses in downtown core compared to downtown Bay. They are identical except for the fact that these five, what I would refer to as more noxious uses, are not allowed in the downtown Bay district. So you will not have a detention facility by you, vehicle repair, quick servicing repair. Those are things that could come up right next door right now. Downtown Bayfront, my apologies. So we're rezoning from downtown core to downtown Bayfront. Sometimes I let my window and slang too far ahead of me. These are the development standards. Again, identical. They allow for the same density, same lot size, same building coverage. The only thing changing is the height to 18 stories. That may seem like a big deal to you right now. I'm comfortable that once I turn this over to Rick to discuss the project design, it might alleviate some of those fears. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rick Gonzalez.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Hopefully, yes. Okay, warm evening. I think they said fall is going to be here Sunday, right? So we hope so, right? So I would like to talk today about the historic portion of the project. My friend Igor is going to be talking about the towers. The towers are what is going to help pay for the $29 million it's going to take to restore this project. And if you can't get the towers built, then there's not an economic engine to save the structures. The structures are in very, very, very bad shape. The building officials already walked through portions of the building. Portions of the buildings are not accessible. We've had a lot of rain. We've had a lot of storms. I'm on the East Coast. I keep praying every day. So far, knock on wood, right? No hurricanes in Florida this year, right? And that's through the end of the year, right? But the Miramar, you know, is under threat. It really is under threat. It's a spectacular building. 400 linear feet of building. I remember when Matthew called me a couple of years ago, hey, I got a historic project for you in Sarasota. I said, oh, I like Sarasota. I remember when Andres Duani came over here and did some plans for the city. Love to see the project. And he sent me some renderings, beautiful renderings that Igor had done, but it was of a brand new building. There was no there was no historic Miramar. And he said something like, can you give it a little touch, right, to make it look more like the Miramar? And I said, no, I can't. But good luck, because that's the way it is. I'm very serious about my work. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. My own business, 36. I started with my dad in 1988, and my son works with us now. So we're very, very serious about doing historic preservation, and we do it all the way across the state, from the Panhandle down to Everglades City. We're restoring a building that, boy, you can talk about really beat up buildings. You can save any building. Mayor Riley of Charleston used to say, one of my heroes used to say, you can save any building, a corner building. If you take it out, it's like a missing tooth, right? If you take a historic building out of a streetscape, you can do it. It takes energy, it takes money and commitment. Rarely do I get a chance to work with developers that want to save historic buildings. Florida is under threat, right? East Coast, West Coast, even Central Florida, right down the spine is changing. We're changing rapidly. And really, when we first met again this past year to restart the project with the restoration, I said to Patrick and to Matt, I said, this could really be a case study for Florida. Not only for Sarasota, but for Florida. We met with the architects of the Alliance, of the Preservation Alliance. They were excited about the project because we're taking economic engine of the towers to help us spend $29 million with the restoration. We've been working with historic preservation contractors and preservation engineers, very different from new engineers and new contractors, because they look at it in a different way. The building can be saved, it can be put back together. So I'm going to do a little history walk, then I'm going to show you some pictures of the structures, the two structures restored. And mind you, it's a little disclaimer, on purpose, I'm going to show you the buildings restored without the towers, on purpose. Why? For two reasons. He's going to show you the buildings restored with the towers, and I really wanted you to focus on the historic restoration. I thought it was really important that we spent a little bit of time with the community to show you these magnificent structures, 400 linear feet. I mean, it's kind of like, I live and work on Clematis Street in West Palm Beach. Our blocks are 600 feet long, and our buildings are anywhere between 50 to 150 feet. So 400 feet is a really long historic building. Next slide, please. As you can see, it's already eclipsed 100 years in 2023. It was built very rapidly to support the hotel. I think you said it was 2 months of construction, right, for the original? Man, I thought the breakers was quick when they took 11 months to rebuild it in Palm Beach, but 2 months to build the front buildings so that in 2024, 23, they could build the hotel, the Grand Lady behind the structure. Next picture. Originally as apartments above and retail below, very recently, the last 40 years or so, since the 1980s, office use and commercial on the first floor. In fact, like in my hometown, I bet you this is the most affordable second floor office space in downtown Sarasota, right? Everything has gotten so expensive with the amount of people that have come to Florida, and our main streets, it's disappearing. So there it is when it was in its grand heyday. Andrew McAnsh, whose street now names the Southern Street, and its grand opening in 1923 on January 1st to really terminate the downtown with all of the interest, just the rapid growth of the city from 1914 to 1924 in 10 years, a lot of development. This was really the anchor for the city. This is before the hotel was built. This was the original streetscape portion. And if you look at the Sanborn maps, the historic maps, they show you development patterns over time. There wasn't nothing across the street or behind, the shops in the front, the courtyard, additional side yards, the hotel, and a beautiful theater where the Aloft Hotel is today, which is not. These are just some really beautiful pictures of what the building used to look like. Really, really gorgeous. Very eclectic too. Some people would say it's Mediterranean revival. I say yes, but it's got some mission and even maybe some early Frank Lloyd Wright with the beams and the overhangs. There's phenomenal large overhangs on the building. I haven't seen that in any other Mediterranean building. Usually they go from 12 inches to maybe 30 inches, but these are almost 4 or 5 feet. A lot of detailing, a lot of interest. and so forth. The theater was spectacular. Too bad we couldn't convince the A-Loft to have kept the theater, right, Tony, on the side of it. But there it is. Courtyard space is just phenomenal. We're going to embrace the courtyard, reconstruct the courtyard, and it's going to be one of the 2 entries into the beautiful apartments that have been designed by Igor. And we're going to have another via too, adjacent to the demarque. There's a 6-foot alley, a via, a pedestrian via. So there'll be 2 ways to cut across the street from one side, from the east side to the west side. And there's also a big change in topography there, by the way. We're going to have I think it's about 8 feet, right, Igor? From the back street down to Palm Avenue in the front. And so the towers, go back for a second, there you go. So the towers will be like that, coming in with the courtyard space up in the middle. Again, the idea of bringing in the courtyards, you'll see Igor's presentation showing those areas, some of that feeling, that idea of history coming in place, all the way through the 70s. That was really the period of significance for this structure, 4 decades, right? 1930s to 1970s. And then, oops, a couple of pictures of the interiors. Stepping down, because again, the topography going up the 8 feet. We'll have similar but different looking steps from the courtyard to the motor court. The elements are there, a lot of the elements are there. We've digitized the building. We have many records now available and photography of the existing space. Notice there's not a covered arcade, but there's a canopy. We're going to bring that back to the original design. And these are just some beautiful, this is probably the best photo, which shows everything. And then also connection to the park and to the waterfront to the west. Another rendering photo from the 30s. And this picture from the 60s, development was already starting to happen along the waterfront in front of the building. The auditorium was still there. But downtown, the historic Main Street, you have a beautiful historic district. You really do. You're really fortunate. When I first came to visit my friend a couple of months ago, I enjoyed it very much with my wife. We walked around. We went to your Main Street, enjoyed dinner. We went to the amazing gardens that you have, walking distance right down the street. That's Selby, right? The Selby, yeah. Selby, just and the waterfront, of course, right? Especially in March, right? It's really nice walking around. Next slide. Now, what happened in Florida, right? A lot of, and I'll show you a couple of case studies, right? A lot of demolition in the 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s. Historic preservation was not valued that much. You know, it was, oh, let's tear it away, let's change it, let's cut an arm off, or cut this off, or do this. The building has had significant changes. And we're like surgeons. We're going to go in there. First, we're detectives. We come in, we measure everything, we look at the photographs, and then we're going to work like surgeons. We're going to remove portions that are not appropriate, that are not original, and then we're going to reconstruct it to match the historic 1923 look. That's our goal. That's what I've been promised by the developers. That's what the $29 million budget gives us, and that's what we're going to do as we move forward with the project. Substantial damage. This is actually a picture of the front. If you walk by the building today, there's that arcade. They added a brick arcade. There was actually trellises that have been demolished, and a parapet was added. So all of that needs to be brought back together. This is an interesting diagram that shows you in red all of the changes that have been done since the 1980s. Okay? The orange portions on other slides show you what was renovated. And the yellow are new items. Windows, they're new windows. They might look a little historic, but they're not really historic. That have been replaced over time in the 1980s. Both the north building and the south building. Same thing with the floor plans. There's a bizarre-shaped garage in the back side of the building, right on the back street. All of these arcades, all of these breezeways. There's this glass tube that is probably 125 degrees every day, from one building to the other. Next slide. Now this is called the laser scan. 40 years ago, we used to measure panels. We used to do drawings, measuring every single drawing. It took a lot of time. We have computers now that scan buildings. Civil engineers usually do it. Universities do it too. With special equipment, it's a point system. So, for example, it measures that column, the width of the beams, every little detail. And it drops into a form that we then convert into a three-dimensional Revit computer file for our drawings. Very, very accurate. Every single condition of the building is shown on the Revit file, and with the engineers, as we start developing the final plans, it'll allow us to be very, very accurate with the renovation and rehabilitation of the project. There's another view of it. Come back to it for a second. One of the arguments at the beginning was turning the corner, right? The demarque, I don't know what they did at the demarque, but it's not historic preservation. They kept a little wall and they added something very large. And we had back and forth, and I said, it's not just a facade. You need to turn the corners. If you don't turn the corners, and Mayor Riley would say that, the corners are integral to a historic block. You must keep the corners, okay? So we are keeping the corners, all 4 corners are being kept. We're turning the corner to the main parapet here, in the middle courtyard. There's the other one, you see the other one, the parapet there, in the other courtyard, that's the second and the third. And all the way even back here where the little 6-foot alley is, all 4 corners are going to be reestablished and restored. Very important preservation. It's not historically designated because it's been changed so much in the 80s. We've been talking about it. We've been talking about getting historic tax credits, trying to get tax credits, Tony, right? We talked about that. We're definitely going to look into that. I'd love nothing more to get a designation, and we shouldn't be afraid of it because frankly, when you build 2 beautiful apartments behind the building, that apartment building is going to be there for 100 years or more. So the restored Miramar for the first time in 40 years will be there for the next 100 years. That's how strong and steady we're going to make the building after we take all the non-contributing visas. All right, structural analysis, we're done. Everybody that does a project in preservation and non-preservation, there are 2 types of engineers. There's engineers that you can pay and they can say, knock it down because it's not in good shape. Or you go and you find a historic preservation structural engineer and they'll work with you. And that's what we found. Just Chuzerna, they're here on the West Coast and on the East Coast. We did a detailed study of the building. They built it without foundations. I've done this before. I did a building in downtown Fort Pierce without foundations. We added helical piles, all the way, little tiny ones inside the building, and strapped a 3-story building, strapped it all the way up to the roof, and anchored the building that way. So it's piece by piece. It's ugly, it's messy, but you can do it, and that's going to be our methodology for the new building. To tie the structure, tie the roof, look at any areas that have been settled, bringing them up. The walls don't have plywood for lateral shear, so when we do the new studs, look at the studs, add the plywood, fix the stucco, replace the stucco, accurate windows, accurate details, accurate roofing. This is another picture just showing it today, its current condition, and I've told you everything that we want to do. Oh, go back to that picture again. Come on. And then a nice thing about the new tower, it's going to cover that. I don't know about you, but when I first came, I stayed at the A-Loft, I walked the corner, I saw the beautiful historic buildings, and then I saw that, so hopefully something nicer will cover that. Okay, and this is unfortunate, I had a couple of case studies, this is the only one that's so-so, right? The demarque kept a wall, and then they added the building, and then they did a cartoon on the back elevation too, which to me, I don't know how that got approved, but it is what it is, right? There's been other buildings here in downtown, like in all downtowns, a lot of historic work that's been remodeled or demolished and been partially rebuilt. And then I have a couple of examples of other case studies. Of course, our office is in Coral Gables. He's not a Miami architect, he's a Coral Gables architect. There's a big difference. Okay, some of you might know what I'm talking about. And when I go visit Igor in his office, we go have lunch in this amazing historic bank space. And they added this amazing hotel seamlessly. This is exactly the case study that we want to present for our Miramar. We want it to be seamless. We want you to walk through that courtyard, go up the 8 feet to the apartment building, and cut through the building if you want to go to the school across the street or other parts of downtown, or just come and use the courtyard space, a little surprise space in the middle of the historic district. This is one of our projects. We currently do the work at Mar-a-Lago. We've been doing it for 26 years. That's one of our projects. This other project is the Lake Worth Beach Casino. I show it because it's an example of a crazy project. And what do I mean by that? Drawings were done, contractors were picked, ready to go work, start the demolition, selected demolition. The thing starts to crumble all the way down to the ground. And we're like, what the heck happened here? send some testing, the concrete for testing, they use this. They use beach sand in the mix, right? And that's happened in many buildings that are on the ocean, you know, and salt doesn't do well with concrete and steel. But I wanted to show it to you because I wanted to show you that a reconstruction, if you work really carefully and really hard with a good contractor and a good client, can come close, very, very close to the original historic structure. Not proposing that here, but it's there in case we need to refer to it. And then this is probably the most important project that I've done in my 30-some years, is the courthouse in West Palm Beach. Here's the original 2016. This is what they did to it in the 1970s. Whenever I have young people or seniors, I tell them to close their eyes and not look at this when we do our walking tours, because it's scary to me, you know, the architecture of the 70s. I'm missing a picture. I should have brought you a picture of how horrible it looked in 2005 when we unwrapped it. So it's a building within a building. We unwrapped it, and I need to add that from the next presentation to show you how, because this is going to be scary. You're going to have a lot of work to do before it looks beautiful and spectacular. It's the historic museum for all of Palm Beach County in downtown West Palm. And then now the pictures, again, focusing just on the historic Miramar portions. This is starting on the south side when you're coming from Aloft, walking north, the canopies restored, the balconies, the parapets, the little detailing, the Frank Lloyd Wright, the trellis. Believe it or not, we're missing a very large trellis area, very open. It was very light and open. And for some reason, they added another curvature, mission style feature. I'm not sure why, but that's what they did in the 80s when they did that. And they added that arcade all along the line. Next picture. This is now the middle. Obviously, there'll be buildings behind it, but the courtyard space will be there. The tube will disappear, and all of the covered walkways will disappear, and the lighter canopy spaces, and all the detailing will be brought back together. And then on the north, so this is actually looking from the north towards the courtyard. And this is the northern wing from looking from the south towards the north. And with photograph and with the scanning, we have enough information to be able to put it back together to give it the look of the historic building. And this last picture is just a beautiful little picture from the 1920s or 1930s, right? And then the file, in fact, so we started drawings. You know, we went a little bit farther. Sometimes you have to go a little bit farther to come back. And I explained that to Patrick, you know, at great expense, right, Patrick? We had to go a little bit farther to make sure that we could have this conversation today, you know, that this is doable. You know, we have a great structural engineer, we have a phenomenal client, and we have a great partner in Igor here presenting now the rest of the project.
All right. So a little bit, we do these projects a lot. On the beach, there's a lot of, Miami Beach, there's a lot of Art Deco buildings that are trying to be preserved. And somebody wants to put in a 200-room hotel and it doesn't fit. The Lowe's, which Candace mentioned, was one of those. And we worked really closely. The historic building is a gem. It's actually freestanding. We had enough property to leave it freestanding. So we're used to this. We work with a lot of historic architects. And just so you know, Rick is really one of the leading historic architects in I was going to say Miami, in Florida altogether. So, you know, we were made responsible to build the engine, the economic engine that's going to allow this to happen. It's a big responsibility, and we sort of wanted to make sure that we didn't lose our minds, and the economic engine was actually very sympathetic to what was going on. You know, we didn't want Rick to put all that work in, and then all of a sudden we come in and flop the building on top. So we sort of took a picture, we sort of backed up and said, you know, this site is in the center of the building. I mean, you can see the circles, you can see your bay, you can see the way the street arcs. It's pretty much, it almost feels like the whole streetscape was sort of designed around this particular site. And we came back to what it was. Not just the historic building that Rick's been talking about, but the whole campus. Take a look at the whole campus. Let's see what else the Miramar Hotel was contributing to the city of Sarasota, beyond that retail apartment building, right? I'm going to call this portion of the presentation Memory of Place. You know, make sure that what we're adding to the building actually contributes, maybe pulls back some of the old memories that somebody might have had if you're 100 years old, and you walk through the site a few years back. So we took these images, and we'll talk about each one in specific, but you can see that we're really looking and taking information from these images. First of all, obviously, rehabilitate the building. But beyond rehabilitating the building, it's really that pedestrian experience. Being able to walk for 400 feet, it's a long way to walk, with retail on one side, a nice wide sidewalk, covered shading above you, two-story building, so it's really an incredibly nice pedestrian experience. And you'll see that not only did we restore the building, but the whole experience of this pedestrian retail thing is still there, very strong, and if anything, much stronger because of all the supporting spaces. The campus was made of layers. There's an apartment building in the front, in the back, as we've been mentioning, there was a hotel. And these layers really enrich your experience when you're walking through a city. When you walk past the building, you say, oh, wait a minute, I can make my way around the corner, walk in between them, get to something else, get to something else. So all of a sudden, this building that you just look at, you can actually go into and almost feel its inner, bowels of how it moves and how it works and all that kind of stuff. And very important to that were these landscaped courtyards. Right between the residential apartment building and the hotel, there were these landscaped courtyards. They're very important because they allow each component to breathe. So they're not, mashed one on top of each other. The apartments can do their thing, and then the hotel building can do its thing, and you can sort of appreciate it all the way around and really get to know each component as it is, or as it wants to. And then the central axis. In this experience that I've been telling you about, the pedestrian experience, it's nice to be able to get to the hotel right through that experience. You don't have to walk around anything. You don't have to make your way, go to the street, make a left, make a right, and then you'll be at the entrance. You're literally at the middle of this experience. It's historic, it's been there forever, and it's just very pleasing to see. And then, that little central piece, which Rick had a really nice, it was the lobby with the steps and the arcades. It's a really nice moment where you're sort of transitioning between the retail, between the sidewalk and the hotel. And we're sort of just turning up the volume on the fact that you're doing something really special. So we took a cue from that. And finally, as we've been pointing out, when this was built, there was nothing in front of us. So we had the opportunity to really, the architects that did this building had the opportunity to really expand the experience. So you can be a block away and see right down the street, right down the sidewalk, across the street, see the entrance to the hotel, see the retail. So it sort of pulls the experience of the building itself, and it sort of expands it, lets it sort of leak beyond our site and beyond the block. And so this image, which Rick showed you, sort of shows all the buildings. And these 6 points are sort of the things that we thought, if our economic engine can contribute and re-establish these 6 things, we go beyond just being an economic engine and helping save the Miramont building. We'd actually be contributing to the experience of what the Miramont used to be. And so really quickly, I'm going to take you through a few slides. Just so you know, these are from Google Earth. Don't pull out your measuring tape. But there is some modifications to it. Here you can see how Rick would sort of leave the building with that centerpiece out. There'll be a trellis over there, but a much cleaner building, right? And then, there's always parking, right? Parking is always a sore topic. But we thought we could take advantage of it because it'll be 2 or 3 stories above this building. And if we can make the walls of it a green wall, actually a growing wall. We're still working with consultants. We're hoping to get the Selby Botanical Gardens involved. We're really hoping to make this a really lush, beautiful space, beautiful wall that contributes to the beauty of it. But more importantly, you can see the roof line of the historic building. A lot of times when you get buildings behind buildings behind buildings, since you can't see the roof line, you sort of don't know where the historic building stops and the new building starts. So we thought we would give the Miramar Apartments a little cushion, a little pillow, which is green, to allow it to be itself, which goes back to that whole landscape courtyard idea of giving building space to be. So the layering of the buildings, beyond just putting one building behind one another, you can see all these different setbacks. Our towers are not gonna be flat. Each tower is actually gonna be composed of 3 little components. And you can see the 3 setbacks, 30, 45, and 75. And then in between, there's 42 feet and 50 feet space. So we're trying to make sure that the building it is gonna be 18 stories at some points, but it doesn't read like an 18-story wall. It's actually broken down. You're gonna see shadows, you're gonna see light hitting one side, shadows hitting the other side. So there's this really nice flavor. And this is just a neat slide because the light blue is basically air going around the building. It's a very effective slide because you see the whole block and you think the building's the whole block, but really, this is the building. And all the blue stuff is sort of air and light going around the building. So we're making sure that even though they're tall, they are tall, they're sort of trying to, get out of the way, put their shoulders in, their elbows in, and not take up more space. And then this is a nice diagram because only the dark yellow is going to be 18 stories. It goes to 18, 17, and 50. So it's this sort of cake piece, and what it does is it recalls the Miramar, the whole hotel, obviously at a different scale, but it did that sort of cake. So go back a second. So there's all this air around it, and then there's air above it. So we're really trying to chip away at the mass of the building and make sure the mass is really pliable. And then this is just an image of everything put together. The buildings, the gardens, and the recreation. You can see there's no building, I have other images, but there's space here. There's space here between here and the streets, and there's 42 feet there. The central axis, we wanted to make sure that, what we did do between that space wasn't just a stage set, wasn't just something pretty that you go and take a picture of and move away. It's actually the access to the apartments. It's actually going to the lobbies. So from here, you'll get to the lobbies, you're coming off the pond. And from here, you can get from the big drop-off down to the retail and the restaurants. So we wanted to make sure that the central axis wasn't just a nice thing to take a picture of, but it's actually going to be used. It's going to be part of the daily routine. This is basically the same image. And it's big, 60 by 72 feet. 60 feet is a typical street width, right? That's a typical right-of-way for a street. It's not a small thing. It's actually a very big place. And here it is. So you can imagine you're coming off the sidewalk, you make a turn, and then back to that transition space that we showed you a picture of. You have this 60 feet by 72 feet wide space, and this light blue that you're looking at is actually the sky on the other side of the building. So we're making sure it's fluent, that you can get through the building, and not just get through it, to a little corridor, but actually have plazas, transition space. And then finally, the axial approach, right? In the back, we're gonna have, by the way, this is gonna be retail on Miramar Court, retail on Miramar Court, a little retail space, and retail all along here. At this area, it's gonna be a garden which sort of takes the way through the drop off. And what we're attempting to do is to take whatever treatment we have in the plaza, in front of our building, on the sidewalk, and cross the street. So now we're hoping to cross the street and even potentially pave the sidewalk across the street. So now you really start to pull the neighborhood in. And here it is sort of course, these are just palm trees and pavers, but you can see if we can get the pavers that go into the plaza, come across the street, use the same landscaping rhythm and treatment on both sides of the street, we're really starting to incorporate the neighborhood into our idea. This is just a clarification of what's getting demolished, what's staying, what's getting built, all that kind of stuff. So the green, right now what exists is this, right? There's a big parking garage and then garage. Of this, the green is what we're completely restoring, bringing back to this historically significant building. And then the back, the red part, is where you saw in the 80s pictures when they tore it down. We're gonna be selectively removing components from it. And then just so you have a relationship with it, this blue line is the outline of the towers that I just showed you. So there's a reason why we're making that selective removal, but we're being very considerate in making sure every facade that's significant is staying. And then internally, we're being very selective, making sure you can see the percentage of green. So massive. We're gonna go through these quick, but I want you to really pay attention. This is our allowed zoning. 0 lot line, 10 stories. You can see the allotted across the street. This is what we could build according to the zoning right now. I'm sorry, I know I'm getting into it. Go to the next slide. And this is what we're proposing. So you can see we're just letting the historic piece breathe completely. Our building is set back. And our building is set back even further depending on where you are in the building. You can see that you can already see more air. I mean, if you just flip back and forth, you can already feel there's more air flowing around this building. Just from the other side, so you know. Again, it's already been done. I mean, this, if you look at it, we're pretty much doing the same thing. Yeah. Go to the next slide. Again, you know, you could just feel it is there. It is tall, right? There's no doubt. Oh, by the way, that's that wall that we're all happy to walk. Go to the next slide. And from the front, so you can see the urban wall. You can see how this has become one giant urban wall, but our building starts to break. It gives us air, gives us air. You know, you can still see the pool deck of our neighbor to the west, east. Sorry, I'm from Colgate. Right? And then this is from the back. This is actually a pool deck of our east neighbor. You can see the lounge. Check it. Next slide. Now these are all Google Earth, so don't judge the quality of the rendering. But this is how much air you'll get, you know, in between there. Go back a second. Great. That. All right, so the next slide, these are just more graphic for you to see. The blue would be what we're proposing, the red is what is allowed. So if you want to look at this, you can consider this, that the red is at that level, the air, the light that you'll be missing out on if we have to build the bigger, lower building, while the blue is what we have to build. This is from the back, from the east side, sorry. Look at that. So really quickly, architecture, now that we've been talking about all this massive stuff. The pedestrian experience I spoke so highly of, that the Miramar is known for, that I'm sure all of you like and love. Here it is, the building is there, we're blocking the demarque wall. It's set back so far that we're still revealing their windows, so we're being good neighbors. So they still don't lose their rooms this way. But you can see that the street side, the street experience is pretty much the same. We're backing up that you don't feel that problem. This is the Miramar Court. We've been talking a lot to the people from the church, and we've had to sort of have a conversation with them. This is the current condition of Miramar Court. There are kids crossing the street, they've got the playground, but you can see the street is pretty much vacant. And what we're trying to do is, this is that retail strip that I told you was in the back of the building. It'll go all the way down the street. It'll be broken up by vehicular entrances, but it's all the way down. And it's 2 stories. We're pulling data from the historic building. So these are both models put together. You get to see Rick's historic renovation is actually his model with his rendering, and our building in the back. I'm very proud to say that our building looks like it's in the back, right? Make sure it feels like it's in the back. Miramar is in the front. The experience is still there. The pedestrian experience is still there. What Rick showed you and what we're showing you now, really the experience from the pedestrian, one of these people, is relatively identical. Courtyard, the entrance to the courtyard. It's at the south corner, very important corner, because for a lot of people, the first time they're gonna see it. And, you know, we didn't speak about, you know, the actual vocabulary, but you can see we're repeating the triple window, we're repeating a lot of the components. They're not identical. We didn't want to copy it, but we did want to make it feel like it came from the same window. Okay. And finally, you know, this is the night shot. This is something I coincidentally came one day to Sarasota. I had never seen these lights, and I took a picture of it. And I remembered it, and I said, you know, this would be a great rendering shot. So I flipped through my iPhone and found it, and we made a rendering of it. It's the existing condition, so this is not including Rick's work, and it sort of cuts the top of the tower, but I think it's a great image. You know, as I'm looking at this image, we're really, it's a great team. I've worked with Patrick on other projects. He does what he says he's gonna do, I can tell you that. He worries about, he is a local, he worries about taking care of his local people. Rick is an extraordinary historic architect, and I think it's just great that we got together to do this. This is a great opportunity for us as a team. It's going to be on all of our resumes, believe me. It's going to be on all our websites, and really this conversation is about hoping that you guys can jump on and be as proud as we are. If not, you can tell us, you can let us know, make recommendations, make comments, ask questions, and really, we want to make sure that everybody is as proud of this as we are up here. Anybody want to?
Your timing was perfect. We have 30 minutes for questions, so I do have a bunch that were on the walls. We can take more, hopefully, so if you still have more questions, there are post-it notes on the tables. Yep, you can have them, and I'm gonna start reading them, and we're gonna start answering them. Yep. Anybody want some while I'm walking around? You might have to need that. All right, I'm gonna read the first one, and then I'll pass out some more. All right. First question. 2 cars can't go down Miramar Court at the same time. How would you deal with that? I'm just taking that. 2 cars cannot go down Miramar Court at the same time. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that. You know, we're still very early on in terms of taking a look. First of all, my name is Philip DiMaria. I'm a certified planner with Kimley Horn & Associates. We're a local engineering, planning, and landscape architecture firm. We do a good amount of work in the city, and this is something that we run up against often. Basically, what occurs when we do a site design or we're looking at off-site improvements is we take first a look at the engineering design criteria manual. And that's really a book published by the city that labels almost every street in downtown and identifies a cross-section associated with it. So for the purposes of Miramar Court, we would be required as a developer for our portion of the site to bring it up to code. If Miramar Court is found deficient in terms of its width, then we'd be required to provide additional right-of-way or additional pavement to ensure that we bring it up to code, like I said. Now, I will say that in downtown Sarasota, sometimes there are instances in which a deficient or a narrower right-of-way could be presented as intentional, and that's to slow traffic down, right? The wider we make roads, more often cars fly down them, right? And so if there's a narrow street, sometimes that leads to traffic calming. Almost always it results in slower traffic and better pedestrian movement. So just something to consider there.
And really quick, there's 70 residential units. It's not a lot of residential units. And the idea of living in this building would be that you go downstairs, you can go out to eat, you can go to retail and all that kind of stuff. So the traffic that this building with these residences is going to produce isn't really that much. So if anything, we wanted to keep it small so people slow down and our residents can get it.
All right, next question. Coming into town, we have road signs identifying SRQ historical area. Where is that?
I'll take that too. So the downtown historic district begins on Palm Avenue. The interesting thing with historic districts is that there are contributing structures that create a district. And I won't claim to be the expert on this, but the downtown historic district starts just north of us, but there are contributing structures that include structures to the south of us, like Burns Court, etc. So all that contributes to the downtown historic district. It really wraps around Main Street, where the main portion of it is. But all of this is published online on the city's website, where you can find the boundaries of the downtown historic district.
And I will say too that the team is working very closely with the Sarasota Historical Alliance on a lot of these things as well, and they have met with them on multiple occasions. Next question, why remove the covered walkway? And will the church playground be removed?
I'll answer that. This one. Well, that's the original design. That's the 1920s design. You know, the arcade or the colonnade was added. It's bulky, it's tight, right? It doesn't really approach the right look, aesthetics, historic aesthetics for the building. In fact, many buildings today are being designed, we're going back to that type of design, because you eliminate columns, you have more room, right? The sidewalks are gonna be very large. Beyond this point, we're gonna have another 20 feet to the curb, you know, but that's what helps with the detailing, to bring back the historical. What's the second question?
Will the church?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I can touch on that one. So the church, actually, some of the members of the church that we've been working with for the last couple of years, or at least a year and a half, attendance, and they keep coming. And I'd like to say that, you know, we've really had a lot of conversations and learned a lot from what they felt would be important in the project. And that's where we've done our best to incorporate a lot of those aspects. And so what the current plan is for the playground, and they could speak to this a little bit further, is to relocate the playground onto the church's property, on the west portion of the church's property, where there's currently some parking and drive-through there. So we worked with them on exploring some options to make sure that was feasible, both economically and location. I think at the end of the day, from our perspective, and you know, from their perspective, it will be a better opportunity for the children to remain on their campus and safer versus having to cross the street that was referenced earlier. So, yeah, that's part of the process. We have acquired the property, the playground property, so that has been incorporated into the design components that Igor and Rick have shared as well. And yeah, so we're excited to activate that side of street on Miramar Court to make that more livable, walkable, and to connect some of these voids in downtown to draw them and provide connectivity opportunities between Pineapple and Main Street, and for the church as well. So for that.
All right, next question. How much of the original foundation building will be maintained, or is it all rebuilt?
There is no foundation in the building. And how did it last 100 years? They just used to build things a lot better. A lot better.
I've seen houses and garage apartments, you know, behind, lath and stucco, right? Even the termites have a hard time with those older buildings, you know? So bringing in the piles will be the first step, you know, so that we have stability for years to come. To fight flooding when a hurricane comes, you know, I mean, there are a lot of issues. And that's why time is really of the essence, you know, really time. I keep telling the developers that we really need to get going maybe on a phase. We talked about that already, phase 1, phase 2, because it'll take longer to build the big buildings. But we really need to get in there and start at least stabilizing the structure, starting with the foundation.
And I actually wanted to add to that too. A lot of people don't realize that the Miramar was built in 60 days in the 1920s. Wooden frame on sand. It has no foundation. There are no concrete pilings or steel or anything, which is one reason why it's in such a precarious situation, and another reason why it's going to cost over $25 million to restore it. They have to go back and add those kinds of foundations to make it last. So
That's a good segue to the next question. The application includes a report stating that to restore the Miramar would cost $25 million. Is there sufficient profit to spend this amount on the existing old building?
I'll answer that question. We hope so. That's the risk of development. This is a multi-year, it's actually a multi-year endeavor. And we hire the best people and we listen and sometimes we get smarter. And a lot has to work, a lot has to happen. The new residential condominiums to the rear, which would be the mechanism to fund the saving of the Miramar, there's a lot that has to happen. And that's why some folks in the last 2 years, as I've chatted with them, have said, well, can't you save every inch of the Miramar? And I said, it's not possible to save every inch because our new building has parking requirements, it has fire safety requirements. We want to have some great open space, courtyard area, as Igor explained. So the new project has to work, it has to be built according to today's standards and safety, wind and safety standards. It has to be sellable. These won't be massive residences like Epic, these will be a bit smaller. They may average, on average, 3,000 plus square foot rather than 5,000 or 6,000. So a lot has to happen behind the scenes to be able to fund the saving of this property.
There's a part 2 to that question. Are you planning to perform a restoration plan and obtain historic designation and apply for tax? I'm assuming it says for tax
Tax
credit.
credits? Yeah, we would love if the project, if Rick can obtain a certification for a designation for historic status. In addition to that, we believe, or the professionals believe, this could be a case study for not only Florida to follow, but the rest of the United States to follow. They've shared with us that it's not often that a almost 400-foot long structure in downtown, in any downtown, one takes on that Herculean task of trying to save that property. So we hope so, and if there are some tax savings that could come from some tax savings in the future, we would love to obtain this.
So at the federal, and also at the county and at the city level. And another thing too, you notice the application today is for a comp plan amendment. This is not a site plan, right? We don't have all the details worked out because the project really depends on the towers, right, Brenda? To be able to restore the historic Miramar.
All right, next question. How long will construction take and will it be at the same time as the Zenith? Probably skip that one. That last part, but how long will construction take?
Yeah, I can answer that. From the time that we start construction, as Rick mentioned, there could be a component of phasing where we can start the stabilization of the existing building, some of the selective restoration. Once we start construction on the new buildings, we would anticipate that would take somewhere between 24 months aggressively to 30 months, a little, somewhere within that range. And what was the second part of that question, Candace?
Will it be at the same time as the Zenith?
I'm not sure what the schedule is for the Zenith, so.
I can tell you that our last substantial project was the Epic condominium on Palm Avenue. And my team had a 22-month schedule with Gilding Construction. And in the middle of the pandemic, where most projects were taking additional years, like 2 to 4 to 5 to 6 years, we finished Epic within 60 days of the original completion. That's how our team generally runs the project. And it was in the middle of the pandemic. We do a more track record with security schedules.
Fantastic. All right, next question. Can you rehab for less than 29 million so that it does not have to be 18 stories? Same design, less stories.
I'll take a first stab at that. So, being perfectly honest with all of you, we've spent a lot of time getting here today, and the funding for this back operation that will support the saving of the Miramar, where does that come from? The residences in the proposed 18-story tower, those upper residences would have some additional views. We would dial up the sales prices on those residences, and due to that additional revenue, we would then take that $29 million and fund the saving of the Miramar of the original building. That's the concept with 15 stories. On a 10-story building, we would probably not build condominiums because it just, the numbers, it's not financially feasible. So that would like to be an apartment with more people and more traffic. So that would, there would be a fallback, so we would be able to build something on the property because we have invested nearly $25 million acquiring sites. That's the answer to the first part.
All right, any mouth? Okay. How does this affect the mark, shadows, views, which is the building behind?
Yeah, so I think, you know, we showed you the massing of the building, and we did that on purpose. You know, between the loft and the demarque and the buildings on the other side, if we were to build to the current zoning, you know, we would be building another, you know, bar like the loft. And you know what the loft is like, I'm not putting it down, I'm just saying it's a very continuous building. They probably needed to get some program in there, and they got it in there. We'd just be putting another one of those there. We immediately said, you know, besides not pulling back some memories from the historic building, just to be good neighbors, we should make the building skinnier, which of course means we gotta make them taller to be able to make it work. And it actually helps the air and the light, that graphic that I showed you, you know, we did it in blue and red to make sure you can see all the red that you were looking at would be lost as far as sight, as far as air, as far as light getting past the site.
Igor, could you jump back a couple slides just to kind of show the vantage point looking from the east towards the west? That would
Actually,
kind of
this-
help
this-
assist with answering that.
This is almost the perfect slide. So, yeah, the red is what we're allowed to build.
Right now, that's what
Right
is
now.
currently zoned now.
And that's we can just do it, right? We just go ahead and go for a permit for that. This is what we're proposing, but of course, you know, we're missing out on square footage, so we wanna put it on top, we wanna make the building skinnier, but it's not just because we wanna go up taller, you know, it's because we wanna give air and light. And there's a diagram that says 17 feet from this building, 15 feet from the street, and 50 feet in the back and 42 feet in the front. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be really bad at math right now, but that's about 80 feet that you're gaining of views through. Now, where they are exactly, you know, we can tell you more or less where they're at right now, but you're gaining more than 80 feet of view